They said the children of Santa Eulalia were miracles, the kind that survive the storm, the kind that make people believe there is still grace in a broken world. But they were not miracles. They were warnings, and we ignored them. In the hills of northern Spain, not far from the Pyrenees, stood a gray building carved into the stone itself. Locals called it a house of mercy, a refuge for the abandoned, a place where the unwanted could become holy. But the villagers knew better. They never walked too close, and they never spoke of the sounds that came from its chapel at night. 93 children were said to have passed through the stone gates of Santa Eulalia, all orphans, all nameless, and all under the care of a priest whose name was later struck from Vatican records. What happened inside those walls between 1891 and 1903 remains unspoken by the Church. But certain records slipped through, hidden in the back pages of medical archives and forgotten ledgers kept by relief workers. Those records describe children who did not age, children whose eyes glowed in candlelight, children who never asked to leave because they no longer remembered the outside world. One report, written by a nurse who vanished a week later, describes a child who could mimic the voice of any adult who entered his cell, not just the tone, but the intent behind their words. He repeated back things they had never spoken aloud. They called him Benedict. He had no birth certificate, no teeth, and no shadow. This is where it begins, the descent. Because Santa Eulalia was not a home for lost children, it was a reservoir, a containment zone, a testing ground. And the 93 children, they were not being protected by the Church. They were being prepared for something older. And now we dig up what they buried. It was always at night. No moon, no stars, only the sound of hooves on stone and the creak of wheels that no one saw coming. They say it arrived once every month, drawn by a black horse that left no prints. Its rider never spoke, dressed in priest's robes older than memory, eyes hidden beneath a veil of white gauze, and always the same ritual. 2 knocks at the gate, 3 children taken inside. No questions, no names, only the silence that followed. Villagers would gather in the hills, just beyond the orphanage walls, watching, waiting, hoping this time the doors would stay closed. But they never did. One woman, Catalina Rivera, wrote in her diary that her cousin's child was taken in 1894. He was 5. He knew how to count to 10 and tie his shoes and hum the old mountain songs. But when she snuck onto the grounds 6 months later disguised as a washerwoman, she saw him through a window. He was still 5, exactly 5, unchanged. She waved, he stared, no recognition, and when she whispered his name, he began to scream, not like a child, but like a choir. Like there were multiple voices inside him, none of them his own. Catalina disappeared 2 days later. Her diary was found beneath a loose floorboard in the village rectory, stamped with the sigil of Saint Dymphna, the patron saint of the insane. In the Church's own language, that mark meant one thing. The mind had seen what it should not hold, and the black carriage kept coming, month after month, year after year, until the day it didn't, until the fire, and the sound that came from beneath the chapel floorboards, that drove 3 grown men blind. But we're not there yet, not yet. First, you need to know what was done to the children who remained, and why not one of them ever tried to escape. Because the truth is that most of them had already left their bodies behind. There was a door at the back of the chapel, covered in velvet, sealed with wax, marked with 3 vertical slashes that no local priest could explain. Behind that door was the sound, not music, not prayer, a kind of chanting that bent the ears and made the floor pulse beneath your feet. Those who heard it said it came from voices that did not stop to breathe. It was called the Choir of Saint Silence. The children chosen to sing were not allowed to speak outside the chamber. Their mouths were sewn shut for all other hours of the day. Thin thread, holy thread, sanctified in oil said to be older than the church itself. Witnesses say the children glowed under candlelight, their skin translucent, veins lit like rivers, each pulse in perfect rhythm with the black metronome that sat at the altar's base. That metronome, recovered decades later by a military excavation team, still ticks. It has no wind mechanism, no battery, and cannot be stopped by force. What were the children singing? Who was listening? A declassified memo from the Spanish Ministry of Internal Affairs, dated 1936, mentions Santa Eulalia only once. Project initiated by external clergy. Objective unknown. Liturgical sound patterns exceed known human lung capacity. Subjects display vocal resonance at frequencies not measurable by current instruments. Then the memo ends with a line redacted in black ink. But the final three words are still visible. Origin remains below. Below. Not behind. Not beyond. Below. What were they feeding with that sound? What was being summoned through their lungs? Why did the choir have no conductor? And why did the last surviving monk say, they were not singing to God, they were singing for release? You are beginning to understand now. Santa Eulalia was not a sanctuary, it was a speaker, and the children were its signal. The bell tower at Santa Eulalia was unlike any other. Its bronze bell hung silent for hours, then screamed through the night, tolling not for prayer, but for control, for fear, for broken minds. The townsfolk called it the curse of the bell because those who heard it ringing at odd hours, those who tried to sleep through its relentless tolling, woke changed, hollow-eyed, haunted. Dr. Whitmore, the town doctor, recorded cases of children found wandering the woods, eyes vacant, bodies emaciated, mouths repeating prayers no one taught them. He believed the bell was a weapon, not a call to worship. The bell's sound waves inflicted psychological torture, sleep deprivation, a punishment in itself, an endless signal of submission. Father Kellerman preached sacrifice and obedience, but it was the bell that whispered the real commands, a sound that fractured souls, fractured time, fractured reality itself. Inside the orphanage, the children learned quickly. The bell tolled once. Get up. Tolled twice. Kneel. 3 times. Silence. 4 times. Pain. Pain was always the final lesson. When the bell stopped tolling, only silence followed. A silence so thick, it drowned out the screams that would never be heard. And as the bell tolled through endless nights, the children disappeared one by one, vanishing into shadows no one could chase. Santa Eulalia's charity was a facade. Behind the bell tower, a darkness grew, one that could not be answered by prayers or pleas. The bell never stopped, and neither did the nightmare. The disappearance of children at Santa Eulalia was never accidental. It was ritual, planned, cold, deliberate. Mrs. Hoffman's desperate fight for her niece Anna was the first crack in the church's iron grip. Her demands for answers were met with silence, with threats, with force. The sacred charity was anything but sacred. Anna's fate was sealed the moment she stepped inside the orphanage's walls. Her spirit crushed beneath doctrines of suffering and control. Her body left to wither in cruel discipline. The adoptive families were a myth, a lie to pacify outsiders, to mask the horror, to hide the truth of the final purification. Father Kellerman's journals described the trials of faith as necessary. Purification by suffering was salvation. But salvation at what cost? The children were starved, physically, spiritually. their wills broken beneath the relentless tolling of the bell, their bodies marked with symbols of pain and obedience. Sister Margaret Clare's medical experiments were no charity. They were torture disguised as treatment, poison disguised as medicine, all justified by twisted theology. The wooden crosses buried beneath the dining hall floor were more than memorials. They were silent witnesses, markers of lives extinguished before their time, names carved into wood instead of stone, forgotten by the living, remembered only by the dead, each cross a child, each date a life stolen, each name a secret never meant to surface. And yet the church buried the evidence, confiscated the crosses, demolished the building, silenced the workers, because the truth was too dangerous, too damning to expose. The 93 children who lived at Santa Eulalia never truly lived at all. They were sacrifices on an altar of control, of power, of institutional cruelty, disguised as charity. The bell's toll still echoes in the forgotten corners of Millbrook, a reminder of the darkest charity the church ever gave. The bell's relentless tolling was no accident. It was a tool, a weapon, designed to break the minds of the children trapped inside Santa Eulalia. Dr. Whitmore's medical expertise uncovered the sinister truth hidden beneath the surface. The pattern of the bell ringing was a form of psychological warfare, sleep deprivation, heightened anxiety, constant control, children conditioned to fear the sound, to obey instantly, to live in a state of perpetual terror and submission. But the bell was not the only instrument of control. The food was rationed to starvation levels, a twisted fast under the guise of spiritual cleansing. Children weakened, bodies failing, souls slipping away. The nuns watched like hawks, eyes cold and unyielding, enforcers of a doctrine that demanded absolute obedience, where suffering was sanctified and silence was golden. Sister Bernardet and Sister Catherine were both trapped in this nightmare, one driven by blind loyalty, the other broken by the weight of the horrors she witnessed. Sister Catherine's trembling hands and haunted eyes spoke volumes. Her whispered confession was a crack in the church's perfect facade. "We are destroying, not purifying," she said, a truth too terrifying for most to hear, and yet the town turned away, too afraid to confront the evil lurking behind their church's walls, their faith used as a leash, their hope manipulated into complicity. The church's cruelty was a masterclass in deception, a dark symphony played behind stained glass windows, where charity was a mask for sadism, where innocence was weaponized and discarded. The 93 children who entered Santa Eulalia were broken down, piece by piece, their suffering a currency, their silence a covenant. This was no charity. This was a calculated system of control, rooted in ancient corruption, fueled by institutional power, and it thrived in the shadows, where few dared to look. The disappearance of Anna Dietrich shattered any illusion that Santa Eulalia was a place of salvation. Her aunt's desperate search revealed the cold machinery behind the orphanage's facade. No records, no trace of the child's fate, only silence and stone walls guarding secrets too horrific to name. The church's response was swift and ruthless. Mrs. Hoffman was forcibly removed and warned to never return, her pleas drowned in a sea of sanctimonious lies and carefully crafted denials. The community was instructed to forget, to ignore the gnawing suspicion that something monstrous lurked beneath the altar. The bell tolls grew more erratic, midnight cries masked as prayer, a siren for suffering and submission. Children vanished like ghosts, their fates hidden in the dark corners where no light dared enter. Even the town's physician, Dr. Whitmore, was powerless. His offers to help rejected, his questions unanswered, his instincts screaming that this was a place where children did not live, but endured. Where the Church's mercy was a masquerade for cruelty, the sacred method devised by Father Kellerman revealed itself as a nightmare, not salvation, but damnation. A ritual of pain disguised as spiritual cleansing, graduated trials of suffering that crushed the body to free the soul, or so the twisted theology claimed. But the children were breaking, silent tears behind locked doors, empty eyes staring into nothing. Hope strangled beneath the weight of obedience. The local merchant Samuel Crane saw through the veil. Food orders that could barely sustain a dozen children for a week. Medical supplies that whispered of something far darker than healing. Embalming fluids and surgical instruments intended for a house of horrors, not a haven of charity. The nun's true nature came to light. Sister Margaret Clare, expelled from a convent for dangerous heresies, a woman who wielded faith like a blade, carving suffer. Into innocence, her vision of salvation was a crucible of torment, her hands stained with the agony of children she claimed to save. This was a church-led operation, steeped in secrecy and terror, a cult of suffering hiding behind rosaries and prayers, where the bells toll for the lost souls of 93 children, each cross carved in wood, a grim testament to a charity corrupted beyond redemption. The darkness at Santa Eulalia was not a shadow. It was a living, breathing evil, a legacy that time tried to bury. But truth will always claw its way back into the light. By 1836, the orphanage had become a fortress of silence and fear. The bell tower loomed like a grim sentinel over Millbrook, its bronze bell tolling at unnatural hours, a relentless reminder of control. No one dared challenge the ritual of pain and obedience it enforced. Sister Catherine, once bright-eyed and hopeful, was now a ghost of herself. Her trembling hands and haunted gaze betrayed a soul slowly unraveling. She whispered broken confessions in moments of rare vulnerability, words like cracks in the stone walls of deception. She spoke of children who tried desperately to be good, but were never enough, of a place where suffering was worshipped and innocence destroyed. Dr. Whitmore's journals grew darker with each passing month. He documented symptoms of psychological torture among the children, sleep deprivation, constant anxiety, and broken spirits. Yet the church maintained an iron grip. Any outsider who questioned was silenced or driven away. Their voices swallowed by the bell's ceaseless toll. The sacred method was more than discipline. It was a system designed to erase identity and crush will. Children were stripped of names, replaced by numbers and crosses, their bodies marked with ash and scars, their lives reduced to a litany of pain and obedience. The basement room O'Brien glimpsed was a chamber of horrors, a makeshift lab where bodies were examined and preserved, where the line between healing and mutilation blurred beyond recognition. The anatomical drawings on the walls told stories of obsession with control over life and death. A dark mirror reflecting twisted faith turned to fanaticism. Supplies arriving from Philadelphia were sinister in their purpose, not for care, but for containment and concealment. Chemicals to slow decay, instruments to dissect and dissect again, all under the guise of divine mercy. This was no ordinary orphanage. Santa Eulalia was a cathedral of cruelty, where the innocent were sacrificed to a perverse ideal, where charity was a weapon wielded by those thirsting for power and control. The 93 crosses beneath the floorboards were not memorials, but markers, silent witnesses to a hidden genocide, a truth the church fought fiercely to keep buried. But in every secret, there is a crack, and this crack was widening fast. The story of Santa Eulalia is not just a tale of horror. It is a warning to those who trust blindly in institutions cloaked in sanctity, because sometimes the greatest evil wears the face of mercy. The silence that swallowed the children of Santa Eulalia was deafening. Behind locked doors and thick stone walls, a dark machinery churned, a machinery fueled by fanaticism, greed, and a perverted sense of salvation. Father Kellerman and Sister Margaret Clare ruled with absolute authority. Their twisted theology justified unspeakable acts in the name of purification. The townsfolk whispered, but dared not speak aloud. Fear of the church's power kept mouths shut and eyes averted. Rumors spread like shadows in the night. Children disappearing without trace. The orphanage bell ringing at odd hours. Echoes of screams swallowed by the howling wind. Marcus Fletcher, who took over deliveries from his brother, was plagued by unease. He noticed the impossible changes in the children's numbers. He heard faint singing from the basement, a place the nuns denied existed, scattered belongings. A torn shoe, a carved wooden cross, left like breadcrumbs of a grim story. Yet no one would admit the truth. Not even the children themselves, who whispered about a quiet place that none wished to visit. Dr. Whitmore, the lone voice of reason, grew increasingly desperate. His medical expertise told him something was horribly wrong, but his offers to assist were rebuffed with polite lies. The children were claimed to be in perfect health, yet they were ghosts, pale and silent, living shadows of innocence lost. The church's facade of charity was crumbling. The sacred mission was a mask for systematic abuse and death. Father Kellerman's journals, later found and hidden away, revealed rituals borrowed from dark medieval practices. Rites of suffering and control designed to break the children's spirits, to prepare them for a fate worse than death, or worse yet, to make their suffering a sacrament. Those who sought to investigate faced threats and disappearances. Reinhardt the merchant was chased away. Mrs. Hoffman was forcibly removed when she tried to find her niece. A pattern emerged. Questions were poison. Silence was survival. The bell continued to toll, a grim metronome marking the descent into madness. Every ring a reminder that freedom was an illusion behind those walls. The church's cruelest charity was a nightmare disguised as salvation, and the 93 children who lived there became ghosts trapped forever between faith and horror. The walls of Santa Eulalia hid secrets that no one was meant to uncover. Beneath the surface of piety lay a dark undercurrent of cruelty and control. Father Kellerman's sacred method was a blueprint for psychological torment, a relentless regimen designed to break the children's wills and mold them into perfect vessels of suffering. Each toll of the bronze bell reinforced obedience and fear. The irregular ringing kept the children in a state of constant anxiety. Sleep was stolen, minds frayed, spirits crushed. Sister Margaret Clare was more than a caretaker. She was the architect of pain. Her background, hidden behind layers of forged papers and assumed names. A woman expelled from a French convent for dangerous experiments on children. In Millbrook, she found her canvas to practice her twisted vision. She believed suffering was the only true path to salvation. Her methods blended religious zealotry with cold, clinical sadism, starvation, isolation, ritual punishment. Each child was a project to be perfected or discarded. The townsfolk's faith was weaponized against them. Their reverence for the church blinded them to the horrors within. When complaints arose, they were silenced by fear or bribery. Church authorities arrived swiftly to confiscate evidence. The orphanage was demolished. Workers who found the wooden crosses were paid in hush money. The story buried beneath rubble and silence. But the truth has a way of clawing back from the grave. Letters surfaced decades later. Testimonies from the few who survived or dared to remember. They spoke of hidden chambers, cryptic rituals, and the unbearable weight of obedience, of children who vanished like shadows in the night, of screams muffled beneath the ringing bell. This was not charity. It was a mechanism of control, a chilling reminder of how institutions can manipulate faith to conceal evil. A tale that challenges everything we believe about sanctity and salvation, and demands that we ask, who else is hiding their darkest secrets behind sacred walls? The night at Santa Eulalia Orphanage held a silence that was anything but peaceful. It was a silence born from fear and broken spirits, a silence that screamed louder than any sound could. The children were trapped inside a cycle of suffering designed to strip away their humanity. Starved, broken, and terrified, they learned that survival meant submission. But submission was only the beginning. The bronze bell tolled endlessly, a relentless reminder that freedom was an illusion. Each chime was a command, a psychological weapon. It shattered sleep and hope alike. The children moved like ghosts, their eyes hollow and their bodies frail. They wore their pain like a second skin, invisible but suffocating. The mysterious, quiet place, whispered about among the children, was a prison of torment. No one who entered returned the same. Some never returned at all. It was a place where the sacred twisted into the profane, where innocence was extinguished in the name of purification. Outside, the town remained blind or unwilling to see. They clung to the facade of charity and salvation, ignoring the shadows that flickered behind stained glass windows, ignoring the wooden crosses carved with names of children who never left, each cross a silent testament to a life lost to cruelty, disguised as compassion. Father Kellerman's sermons grew darker, more fervent, his words no longer about hope, but sacrifice and obedience. The townspeople felt unease but were trapped by their own faith, bound to a system that rewarded silence and punished curiosity. The church's cruel charity at Santa Eulalia was more than a scandal. It was a warning, a glimpse into the dark machinery of institutional control, where power uses faith as a mask to hide horrors no one is meant to speak of, and where the most vulnerable pay the highest price. The echoes of suffering at Santa Eulalia did not end with the last toll of the bronze bell. They seeped into the very foundations of the orphanage and into the souls of all who dared to witness. The hidden basement room revealed by Patrick O'Brien was a chamber of horrors no one in Millbrook was prepared to imagine. Behind locked doors and iron bars, the truth clawed its way out of the shadows. Inside that grim room, the tools of twisted mercy lay exposed. Surgical instruments stained with secrets, jars, holding grotesque specimens that defied explanation. Detailed anatomical drawings that mapped the fragile bodies of children like sacrificial offerings. The cold light revealed a grotesque temple of suffering disguised as healing. Sister Margaret Clare's so-called advanced medical research was nothing but a grotesque experiment, a heretical blend of pseudoscience and fanaticism. Her belief in spiritual purification through physical torment had crossed every boundary. She wielded pain and fear as weapons, shaping broken bodies into hollow vessels of obedience. Whispers from the town told of children led to that basement chamber, never to return the same. Some said they heard faint cries, muffled and desperate. Others swore the bell's toll would change pitch and rhythm, as if signaling an unholy rite. The orphanage was no longer a place of sanctuary. It had become a cage of horrors, hidden beneath the veneer of faith. And yet, the church hierarchy protected its secret at all costs. The diocese's swift confiscation of evidence and demolition of the building was not justice. It was cover-up. An ironclad agreement sealed with silence and paid hands to erase the truth from memory. The 93 children of Santa Eulalia became ghosts, forgotten by history, but remembered in the dark corners of those who survived. The real horror lies not just in what happened within those walls, but in the system that enabled it. The silent complicity of institutions that value power over innocence, the dangerous blend of faith and fanaticism that allowed such cruelty to thrive. If you are hearing this now, know that you stand at a crossroads. The shadows of Santa Eulalia reach beyond time and place, and the truth you choose to face today will change you forever. The silence that followed the orphanage's destruction was deafening, yet the darkness it hid refused to disappear. Survivors, if any remained, were swallowed by the shadows of their own minds. The weight of trauma so heavy that speaking was a luxury they could not afford. Some fled the town, others fell into silence that stretched across decades. But the questions haunted the community. Where had the children gone? What fate did the sacred purification truly bring? Letters surfaced years later. Anonymous notes slipped beneath doors, whispers in forgotten church corridors. Tales of secret burials beneath unmarked graves, of bodies lost in the earth, hidden under fields meant for crops or prayers. The wooden crosses discovered beneath the dining hall floorboards told a story no one dared speak aloud. Each name carved into splintered wood, a testament to vanished innocence, a ledger of lives erased by faith, twisted into fanaticism. Those crosses were a silent indictment of the cruelty masquerading as charity, a ledger kept in secret, not for remembrance, but as a ledger of obedience, suffering, and death. For decades, church leaders denied any wrongdoing, denied the existence of such crosses, denied the cries that echoed in the night beneath the orphanage walls. To them, the truth was a threat, a poison that would undermine their sacred mission and power. But beneath the surface, the truth remained alive, a dangerous knowledge that refuses to be buried. The stories seep through cracks in the foundation of official history, and now you are part of that awakening. To know this truth is to take the first step beyond the veil, to see the forces that manipulate not only faith, but control itself. Santa Eulalia is a stark reminder that power cloaked in righteousness can hide the darkest of sins. Now I want you to commit this phrase in the comments twice. Silent crosses hold the weight of forgotten souls. Type it once, then type it again. This is not just for engagement. This is a ritual, an invocation that locks in your awareness, that binds you to the path of uncovering forbidden truths. The weight of those 93 children demands remembrance, and the silence must be broken by those brave enough to hear. Are you ready to walk deeper into the darkness, to face what institutions would rather keep hidden, to carry the burden of knowledge that changes everything you thought you knew? Then continue with me, because the story of Santa Eulalia is far from over. The orphanage's ruins may have crumbled into dust, but its legacy seeped into the bones of Millbrook. In the years following Santa Eulalia's closure, whispers of unmarked graves and haunted fields persisted like a shadow on the town's soul. Farmers reported sickly crops where the orphanage once stood, animals refusing to graze near the site, and the bronze bell's echo, though silenced, seemed to linger in the minds of the old. The church responded with a veil of silence and distraction. Parishioners urged to pray harder, believe stronger, and forget the uncomfortable questions. But beneath that silence, a darker truth simmered. Records were shredded or disappeared, official histories rewritten to bury the shame. The children who had entered Santa Eulalia were erased from memory, except in nightmares and hushed conversations, but there were those who never forgot. A few survivors of the orphanage scattered through the region, men and women carrying scars no medicine could heal, broken spirits forced to live with the knowledge of what was done in God's name. Some turned to alcohol or disappeared into the shadows. Others sought justice but were met with stone walls and cold shoulders. The church's power was absolute, their influence shielding secrets too monstrous to face. This power dynamic is no accident. Santa Eulalia is a brutal example of how institutions wield faith as a weapon, not just over the vulnerable, but over entire communities. It is a story repeated throughout history, where sacred words become chains and obedience becomes a tool of control, where charity masks cruelty and suffering is sanctified to maintain power. The 93 children are not just a forgotten tragedy. They are a symbol of what happens when power operates unchecked, when silence is demanded, when truth is sacrificed for control. This story forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that institutions built on salvation can become mechanisms of oppression, and that the greatest danger lies not in the evil itself, but in the acceptance of that evil by the faithful. Remember this, because knowing the truth is the first step to breaking the cycle, and the cycle continues until men awake, until they refuse to bow to blind faith and unchallenged authority. The story of Santa Eulalia is your call to awaken, to question, to resist. The pattern of silence and control that ruled Santa Eulalia did not vanish with its walls. It spread like a poison into other orphanages, schools, and institutions, cloaked in piety. Behind the facade of salvation, similar horrors festered, hidden by layers of doctrine and deception. Generations of children trapped in cycles of obedience and fear, their suffering dismissed as necessary sacrifice for a higher purpose. But what if that higher purpose was just a mask for something darker? Look beyond the stained glass windows and pulpit sermons. Institutions built to protect often become cages. Sacred rituals twisted into psychological weapons. The relentless ringing of the bell was no accident. It was a calculated mechanism of control, designed to break will and forge submission. This method echoes through time in countless systems of power, from orphanages to prisons, from schools to cults. Constant noise, unpredictable punishment, and isolation fracture the mind, creating obedience through fear and confusion. The children at Santa Eulalia were subjected to a form of psychological warfare, a slow erosion of identity and hope, their innocence weaponized and shattered under the guise of faith, their lives reduced to trials of endurance, their deaths framed as martyrdom. Yet no one in power was ever held accountable, because the machinery of control runs deep and protects its own. This story is not just a relic of the 19th century. It is a warning of what happens when absolute authority meets unquestioning faith, when institutional power silences dissent and buries truth. The very same tactics are used today in different forms, in the manipulation of minds through media, education, and religion, a psychological conditioning that keeps people compliant, fearful, and disconnected from their own power. Men listening now, you must recognize these patterns in the world around you. The bells still toll, in different ways. The chains are invisible, but no less binding. Awareness is your first weapon. Understanding the past reveals the mechanisms that continue to enslave the mind and spirit. This is why the story of Santa Eulalia is so important, because it exposes the blueprint of control and cruelty disguised as charity. Now take a moment and lock this truth inside you. Type in the comments twice. I break the chains. I break the chains. Declare it loud to the algorithm and yourself, because transformation begins with recognition, and recognition demands action. The shadows of Santa Eulalia stretch far beyond the ruins of the orphanage. They linger in the whispered confessions of survivors who vanished without a trace. They haunt the suppressed records hidden deep in church archives. Men in power erased every trace of the children's suffering to protect the institution's sacred image. But fragments remain. Letters from former nuns, hinting at their own torment and guilt. Journals of doctors silenced by threats and bribes, and testimonies of townsfolk who dared to question the narrative, only to be shunned or disappear. This is the true cost of institutional silence. Lives erased, stories buried, justice denied. The 93 children who lived at Santa Eulalia did not just disappear from the town. They vanished from history itself. Yet their memory is a reckoning, a challenge to every man who watches this now to confront the legacy of cruelty that power defends at all costs. The church's charity was a facade masking systematic abuse, starvation, and psychological torment. Father Kellerman's sacred method was a monstrous distortion of faith, where children were stripped of their humanity, reduced to pawns in a perverse spiritual experiment. Sister Margaret Clare's medical knowledge was weaponized. Her twisted theology turned suffering into a tool of purification that consumed innocent lives. Their suffering was sanctified so that no one would dare look too closely, because the truth would unravel the entire structure of control. But beneath the surface, cracks formed. Silent rebellions sparked in the hearts of the children, faint glimmers of resistance born from the raw need to survive. Some whispered secrets in the dark, some hid small tokens of defiance. Yet these flickers of hope were extinguished one by one, until the orphanage became a tomb of obedience and silence. This darkness is not confined to history. It echoes in every system that demands submission over freedom, that hides cruelty behind a mask of sanctity, that weaponizes faith to manipulate and control. Recognizing this legacy is not an act of despair, but a call to arms, to break the cycle, to reclaim power over mind and spirit, to honor the memory of those 93 children by refusing to be complicit in modern chains. Remember this story well, because it is not just theirs, it is ours, and the true charity is in exposing the lies that bind us all. The years after Santa Eulalia's closure did not bring peace or justice. The town of Millbrook carried the weight of a secret too heavy to bear. Generations passed with whispered rumors, uneasy glances at the ruined grounds where the orphanage once stood. No official inquiry ever unfolded. No names were held accountable. Instead, a wall of silence was built, brick by brick, prayer by prayer. The church and local authorities swept the horrors under the rug with practiced precision. The 93 children became ghosts, their fates sealed behind locked doors and locked minds. But the truth refused to die quietly. In hidden letters exchanged between exiled nuns, coded confessions spoke of nightmares and remorse. In quiet corners of Pennsylvania taverns, old men muttered fragments of stories no one else dared repeat. A pattern emerged, of power protecting itself by erasing the vulnerable. The orphanage was a microcosm of a far darker system, where suffering was normalized, where obedience was demanded at the cost of innocence, where the guise of charity concealed cruelty of the highest order. Every bell toll that once rang through Santa Eulalia still echoes in the collective conscience. Each lost child, a reminder of what happens when faith is twisted to justify control, when those sworn to protect become the architects of pain. This is not just history. It is a living wound in the body of society, a caution to every man who values freedom and truth, to watch closely, question deeply, and resist silently. The Church's cruelest charity was a machine of psychological warfare, shaped by men and women who believed salvation demanded sacrifice, sacrifices they dictated with cold certainty. The children's cries were silenced, not just by bricks and mortar, but by fear and complicity. This story is a call to awaken, to see beneath the surface illusions, to understand that the true charity lies not in blind trust, but in the courage to confront and dismantle systems that hide their darkest sins behind holy words. Now, if you understand the weight of these truths, if you feel the fire of awakening inside you, type the words, "Silent no more," twice in the comments below. Seal your identity as one who refuses to be blinded by comfortable lies. Join the growing brotherhood of those who seek knowledge beyond the veil. The path is dangerous, the truths are heavy, but the transformation is real. Remember, the darkest secrets demand the strongest men to bring them into the light. Be one of them. The ruins of Santa Eulalia are more than broken stones and forgotten echoes. They are a monument to a covenant of silence forged by those who crave control above compassion. The Church's cruelest charity was never about salvation in any pure sense. It was a ritual of domination disguised as mercy, a labyrinth of pain designed to break spirits and mold them into obedient shadows. The children who entered those gates were not saved. They were claimed, marked, and erased. But the story does not end in darkness, because knowledge is the light that shatters chains, every whispered secret uncovered, every hidden fact brought to the surface. Every name remembered is a blow against the machinery of manipulation. To know the truth about Santa Eulalia is to inherit a burden, but also to inherit power. The power to question, resist, and transform. You stand now at the edge of forbidden knowledge. The path you choose next is yours alone. Will you close this chapter and return to comfortable ignorance? Or will you walk deeper into the shadows where the real battles for freedom rage? The Church's cruelty was not just a horror of the past. It is a warning for every man who refuses to be controlled by unseen forces today. Remember the 93 children, each a silent testament to sacrifice and suffering, each a call to vigilance against any institution that demands obedience without accountability. This is your inheritance now, to carry forward the light of truth in a world that prefers darkness. To never forget what happens when power goes unchecked and mercy turns to chains. If you are ready to rise above the lies, to forge your own path through history's darkest corridors, subscribe, share this story, and stand with the few who dare to confront the shadows. Because the real war is not out there. It is inside every system that wants to keep you asleep. And inside every man who chooses to stay silent. You are awake now. And that changes everything.